Number 10. Weapon X. After the Mutant Legion went back in time and accidentally killed Xavier, Apocalypse came out of hibernation 10 years too early and took over control of the United States. Enter the Age of Apocalypse story. The Logan of Age of Apocalypse is extremely ferocious, and he goes by the name Weapon X. He has only one hand after having it blasted off by Cyclops, but his claws still pop through the nub. He and Jean Grey set off apart from the X-Men to save mutants and stop Apocalypse. Weapon X eventually becomes the new Apocalypse, gaining his celestial and mutant powers to try and stop aliens from destroying the population of Earth. It's nuts! I suggest you check out the story. Number 9. Dark Claw. So what happens if you take Logan and you take Bruce Wayne and just mash them up together? Do some quick maths and you'll find you get Logan Wayne. This awesome character is from the Amalgam universe of Earth 9602. After he saw the murder of his parents, Logan went to live with his uncle up in Alberta, Canada, who was then de-lifed by poachers. He then went to kick it with some nuns and then joined up with the Canadian Air Force. At some point, he joined the Weapon X program and learned of his mutation and gained his claws alongside Creed H. Quinn, who would become a Wolverine-Joker hybrid named Hyena. Logan Wayne would go back to New Gotham City, where he decided to avenge his parents' and uncle's deaths by donning the costume and name of Dark Claw. Number 8. Feral Wolverine. Imagine you had an adamantium coating on your skeleton, and then one day a guy who controls metal comes along and rips it all out of your body. Think you'd go a little crazy? Well, no, you probably wouldn't survive. But if you were Wolverine with that healing factor, then yeah, you would. And then you'd almost definitely lose a bit of sanity. That's exactly what happened to turn Wolverine feral after the 1993 Fatal Attraction crossover. The adamantium was actually holding back a secondary mutation that turns Wolverine feral, and he became an absolutely scary monster, even being drawn without a nose for some reason. Number 7. Werewolf Wolverine. Bet you thought you'd see a zombie Wolverine on this list. Well, you were wrong. I saw that some of you are tired of hearing me talk about Marvel Zombies all the time, so in this point I'm going to be talking about Marvel Zombies / Army of Darkness. And it's not a zombie, it's a werewolf, so there. When Ash is sent through a portal in issue number 5, he goes to multiple different worlds before settling on a world where a whole bunch of heroes have turned to werewolves. And Werewolverine is one such hero, or villain, I guess now. He gets a sweet whiff of Ash, and he and the other werewolves descend on him in the final pages of the comic. Hey bub, you're gonna like this video, right? I'm sorry, I can't be intimidating, but maybe if I ask really nicely, you'll want to subscribe? Maybe? I'll let you decide while I continue making this video. Number 6. Vampire Wolverine. Another what if? Yep, in What If number 24, Wolverine is actually immune to being turned into a vampire from just a regular bite. Instead, when he kills Dracula, he actually decides to have a little snack on the dead vampire, and this is what actually turns the mutant. He becomes the new Lord of the Vampires in Dracula's place. This version and character even kills and feasts on most of the other members of the X-Men. So it's Wolverine, but with the ferocity and lethality of a vampire. Wait, isn't that just normal Wolverine? Number 5. Deathlok Wolverine. On Earth 11045, all superhumans were converted into mindless cyborg Deathloks, and then used as a global police force that created a global utopia for the everyday man. Wolverine was one of these superhumans that was converted. He and the rest of the Deathlok X-Force are sent to the past together to secure the world and kill X-Force of the past and Uncanny X-Force number 6. Again with time travel? Come on! At least he looks totally terrifying. Number 4. Pack Logan. Yes, it's another feral version of the character. This time at least, he isn't completely alone. Joining him in his animalistic state are Sabretooth and Wildchild. The three roam the wilds of the Canadian wilderness as a pack. While living in the wild and barely wearing any clothes, they aren't completely mindless. They actually recruit some of the other mutants to go to the Weapon X facility and discover their dark past. That is until they totally lose control and kill everyone. Yeah, maybe they are mindless. Number 3. Weapon H. What do you get when you combine Wolverine and the Hulk? An absolute monster of a character. In Totally Awesome Hulk number 21, we're introduced to Clayton Cortez, a former Marine who was subjected to Weapon X Batch H division, which primarily tried to create Hulk-Wolverine hybrid cyborgs. Clayton became H-Alpha. He had an adamantium skeleton, a healing factor, and claws just like Wolverine, but the ability to change from human form to his Hulk-like form that gave him near limitless super strength and other Hulk abilities. He is an absolute beast, and his creator says that he can defeat nearly everyone on the planet, which I believe. Number 2. Venom Old Man Logan. Thank the Lord for the Venomverse. It's home to some of the best alternate versions of comic book characters. For example, one Venom is the continuation of the Old Man story that has Logan get eaten by the Venom T-Rex. The symbiote deems Logan a more worthy host and bonds with him, and he bursts out of the T-Rex as Venom Wolverine. This version of Wolverine is insane, lacking in ethics, uncaring, and sports a whole whack of symbiote weaknesses, which kind of makes him a tiny little bit less cool, but Venom Wolverine! He's scary, check him out. Number 1. Sideburns, the regenerating planet. When Galactica, the daughter of Galactus, is looking for her next meal in issue number 1 of her self-titled comic, she finds Earth, a lovely little snack. But while looking at her dinner option, she comes upon Wolverine. Realizing his mutant regenerative abilities, she formulates an idea of using a bit of his harvested DNA with a bit of celestial power to create Sideburn, the regenerating planet, a planet-sized Galactus meal that would grow back after each meal, giving them billions of years of meals. Unfortunately, she realizes just as quickly that a planet made up of Canadian mutant DNA like this would be highly unstable. Unfortunate, because I'd love to see this guy floating through the galaxy.
Number 10. Anti-living Batman. I am so torn when it comes to this zombie-like infected version of Bats. He hails from the deceased universe where he ends up tragically being infected by the anti-life equation and turned into a member of the anti-living, a mindless, violent zombie. However, before this happens, Batman is one of the first to figure out just what is really going on and to try to find a cure or a way to stop it. In the end, however, he gets infected, and despite trying to slow down the infection with one of Mr. Freeze's cryo suits, succumbs to the virus. He doesn't stay a zombie-like anti-living being for long though, as Alfred Pennyworth, his butler, puts him out of his misery. Really, his whole transformation is just like making preparations, passing on vital information to those not yet infected, and saying goodbye to his son Damian Wayne. So like, he's a monster, but like, it's a really sad journey getting there.
Number 9. Owlman. Owlman, or Thomas Wayne Jr. of Earth 3, isn't a monster in the physical sense, but certainly in the personality department. If you haven't heard of Earth 3, it's basically a place where strength is praised above all else, and it's home to the Crime Syndicate of America, which is the evil Justice League. Basically, Thomas is about as bad as you can get. For example, as a kid, he believed his parents were mismanaging their money, so he decided to kill them in cold blood. His younger brother Bruce protested to this, and he too was killed. He took the city of Gotham for his own through fear, bribery, and blackmail. He killed the family of Richard Grayson to make the boys susceptible to his influence. He even had a strange affair with Ultraman's partner, Superwoman. Owlman is a bad dude.
Number 8. Batman the Silenced. One of my favorite things about the DC multiverse is that we don't just have the multiverse. We also have the dark multiverse. Or we had the dark multiverse. Anyways, still, I'm confident it will return given time. Just give it enough time and everything comes back around, baby. Thank you, comics. The Dark Multiverse is like the Elseworlds' Dark Reflection, and when it comes to the anthology series Tales of the Dark Multiverse, or Tales from the Dark Multiverse, one or the other, often offered to readers in small batches with creative teams presenting their own dark realities and twists on classic DC tales. One such character and tale that gets twisted in the Dark Multiverse is Batman's Hush. In this world, the roles become reversed, with Thomas Elliot taking over Wayne Enterprises and locking Bruce away in Arkham Asylum, after Bruce moved in with the Elliot family following the death of Martha and Thomas Wayne. However, Elliot isn't Batman in this reality, but a corrupt senator and business owner. It's not a straight role reversal, working with the League of Assassins. Bruce, however, is not as crazy as he seems, and he ends up escaping Arkham and becoming the Silenced, in essence an anti-hero out for revenge on Tommy, whose character design resembles Hush. Did I mention how creepy he is, by the way? He's super creepy.
Number 7. Leatherwing. According to Earth 10's history, the Axis powers managed to achieve history in World War II. With the National Socialist Party victorious, Bruce became a willing agent of their perverse plans, taking on the identity of Leatherwing. As you can imagine, this guy wasn't too great. Holding the beliefs set out by the powers that ruled, he was against interracial relationships, he believed in a master race, and he held up the many fascist ideals of his team, the New Reichman. Thankfully, the New Reichman were betrayed by their leader Overman, who still knew that this way was the wrong way. Still a crazy racist Batman. Gives me chills.
Number 6. Red Death. Another villainous version of Bruce Wayne, Red Death also hails from the Dark Multiverse. If you can't tell, I really like the Dark Multiverse. However, he doesn't come from the Tales of the Dark Multiverse series, but is rather one of the Batman Who Laughs Dark Knights. The Dark Knights are basically like an evil collection of Batmen from across the Dark Multiverse, each one standing in or representing a member of the Justice League. Red Death represents the Flash. In his reality, Bruce Wayne was pushed to the limit after losing so many of his sidekicks, believing that he would be better at using the Speed Force than Barry Allen. He stole the Speed Force from him and then proceeded proceeded to use it to kill all of his enemies, becoming known by the speedster and villainous mantle of Red Death.
Number 5. Frankenbat. Castle of the Bat is an Elseworlds story from 1994 that basically takes the story of Frankenstein and plops in Batman character. So, Bruce Wayne, after suffering the death of his father Thomas Wayne, goes almost mad trying to find a way to bring his father back. He succeeds, but not in the way he or anyone else wants. Thomas Wayne is brought back to life and dresses just like Batman normally would, but with more of a gothic Victorian style. And he's a mindless, massive, undead monstrosity. He busts out of where he's being held, and it leads to Bruce having to apprehend his undead dad. The story is actually quite emotional. Check it out.
Number 4. Gods and Monsters. That's right, in the alternate reality of Gods and Monsters, there isn't really a prominent Bruce Wayne. Instead, here Kirk Langstrom, known as Man-Bat in the Prime Earth and New Earth continuities, takes up the mantle of Batman, becoming part vampire bat, part man, also pseudoscience vampire. He was attempting to create a cure for lymphoma, which did work but ended up splicing his genes and turning him into a science-made vampire. Kirk, as Batman from Gods and Monsters, does need to consume blood to survive and typically feeds on either animals or criminals to get it.
Number 3. The Devastator. On alternate Earth -1, Batman and Superman were pals, and everything was dandy. Until one day, Superman changed and rampaged, turning on humanity. Superman killed almost everyone, and Batman tried his best to help bring his friend back. But once Superman killed Lois Lane and cut off Batman's arm, there was no going back. Batman injected himself with the Doomsday virus, turning him into the Devastator, powering him to take out Superman but also making him lose all his sympathy. He still retains all the knowledge of Bruce Wayne plus the fighting skill, and he acts as the muscle for the Dark Knights. Truly a monstrous Batman.
Number 2. Vampire Batman. Gods and Monsters isn't the only reality where Batman becomes a vampire. Oh no. I mean, he is Batman after all, he's Batman. Obviously he's gonna be vampires a lot. He also ends up as one in his fight against Dracula in Red Rain. However, Bruce attempts to resist fully turning and giving into his monstrous side here. Instead, he attempts to hold off on completing his transformation fully, becoming a sort of Dhampir, if you will. That is until Joker kills Catwoman, who in this series is also a werewolf. Spooky stuff. Joker taking Selina's life makes Bruce snap, and he ends up feeding on him, seemingly killing him, although it would later be revealed that Joker survived this whole ordeal. Afterwards, Batman has Alfred lock him away, worried about the monster he'll become because he has now tasted human blood.
Number 1. The Batman who laughs. I know, I've talked about him like a lot, but it is for a good reason. The Batman who laughs is arguably one of the most dangerous versions of Batman who's ever lived, or been written. If you don't know yet, he is a dark multiverse version of Batman who has killed the Joker, but inadvertently infected himself with a strain of Joker toxin. The resulting transformation turns this version of Bruce Wayne into an amalgamation of Joker and Batman. All the intelligence and resourcefulness and martial skill of Batman mixed with the buck-wild, psychotic, murderous mind of the Joker. He is pure chaos and destruction, and he lays waste to his own Bat family and the Justice League. He has a pack of Jokerized Robins, and he is the leader of the Dark Knights, a few of which were featured on this list. On top of that, he is just truly terrifying to see.
Number 10. Man-Spider. Man-Spider is a version of Peter who ended up mutating and having multiple arms from the main continuity. It was a pretty freaky time in Peter's life and happened after Spider-Man tried to create a cure to get rid of his abilities and return him to his normal old depowered self. Unfortunately for Peter, this definitely did not work as planned and instead just left him with 4 arms instead of 2. Basically the opposite of the desired effect, leaving him more freaky than normal, which was kind of what he was going for. There is a version of the 4-armed Spider-Man who actually ended up keeping the arms instead of getting rid of them, and he hails from the reality of Earth 1298 and is known as Man-Spider, obviously. I'm guessing that having a secret identity would be pretty tricky for someone like Man-Spider. Number 9. Savage Spider-Man. Savage Spider-Man had an upbringing among monsters, and for that reason can be considered kinda monstrous. His appearance isn't super super monstrous, although he does share his editorial name with a series that seems to feature a pretty frightening looking mainstream Savage Spider-Man, which we may or may not talk about later. Savage Spider-Man of Earth 83043 ended up getting his powers from growing up in the Savage Lands. His story is that he was lost there after the plane he was on with his parents crashed. His parents died in the crash, but young Peter survived and was taken in by the giant spiders of Savage Land, whose toxic bites helped him to build up both an immunity to toxins and also granted him spider-like superpowers. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you haven't already, please head on over to Facebook where you can follow us there as well. It really does help us out here and it helps us out there. So yeah, just help us out. And also thanks for doing that. If you've already done that. You're like, I get it, Amanda, you say it every time. Just want to make sure you know. Number 8. Scarlet Spider. Kane was one of the clones of Peter Parker that we got to know in the Clone Saga. He typically goes by the mantle of Scarlet Spider now, which at one point was actually used by another Peter clone, Ben Reilly. Initially in the comics, Kane was presented more as a villain, or at least a misunderstood villain. He misunderstood hero. He wasn't really completely a straight up villain, but he did some shady things. He was a clone that was basically defective, and as a result his degeneration messed with his mind. He also came with the mark of Cain, which was pretty monstrous, which allowed him to seemingly burn the skin of those he touched, typically leaving his mark of Cain on their face. In reality, this was just a variation of Spider-Man's wall crawl power, as when Spider-Man crawls on walls, this is because of little hook hairs basically in his hands and feet, which allow him to stick. See the Sam Raimi movies for that in person. Similar deal for Kane, but he was using this to basically melt people's faces at the time. Number 7. Ghost Spider. Not to be confused with the other Ghost Spider, Gwen Stacy of Earth 65, this Ghost Spider is an alternate version of Peter Parker from Earth 11638. In this reality, Uncle Ben did not die and was there to help mentor Peter Parker as he continued on his journey as a hero. Peter here became not just a celebrity and an icon as a superhero, but was also a successful business owner and a philanthropist. However, in secret, he and Ben were working together to lure other Spider-Men from other realities to their world so that they could zap them of their power, killing them in the process in order to bolster Earth 11638 Spider-Man, transferring their powers to him and making him stronger. In the end, Spider-Man of Earth 616, who fell into this trap, helped Earth 11638 Peter Parker to see the error of his ways. Having a change of heart, this version of Spider-Man sacrificed himself to save 616 Peter, ending up in a coma as a result. He was returned to life by an alternate Sorcerer Supreme who needed his help, and then came back as the Ghost Spider, who kinda looks like a blue flame Ghost Rider. Number 6. Mainstream Savage Spider-Man. Mainstream Savage Spider-Man comes from his own self-titled series, which spins out of Non-Stop Spider-Man. So if you wanted to read Savage Spider-Man, I'd recommend going back and reading that first. I think it's only like 5 issues, so it's also not too long. This story, I believe, is part of the mainstream continuity, so technically the Peter Parker that we see here in his monstrous form is in fact Earth 616 Peter Parker. In the Non-Stop Spider-Man series, there was even mention of the Beyond Corporation, which also helped me to really cement this, at least in my mind, as part of the main continuity canon. I mean, I saw it was kind of listed as that, but I was skeptical, and then I saw that and I was like, nah, no, it's probably main continuity. I think we can definitely say it's main continuity. So hopefully I am right and not wrong about that. But while this is technically 616, it's also a very specific look and time in Peter's life, like back when he had those 4 arms, which we kind of touched on earlier. So I figured I could count it for the purpose of this list. It's also where our thumbnail for this video will likely come from, so thought it might be cool to explain it if you're like, hey, what's that thing? That's Savage Spider-Man. Savage Spider-Man is Earth 616 Peter Parker mutated by the drug known as A+, which typically improves performance at the cost of intelligence for most users. However, for Spider-Man, due to his unique physiology, it also turned him into a kinda like part man, part spider monster hybrid thing. Poor Peter. Number 5. Spider-Man. Spider-Man is definitely one of the creepiest ideas for an alternate Spider-Man that we've seen in maybe ever. This version of Peter Parker was actually consumed by spiders, but his consciousness was also absorbed by them. So while physically he's gone, mentally he kinda like lives on in them. He's literally a Spider-Man made of spiders. Hence the name Spiders-Man. He has a tragic backstory, but don't feel too bad for him. He also would be the one to team up with a Norman Osborn version of Spider-Man, plotting to betray the rest of the spider army that he had been recruited to. And he also, as a bunch of spiders, sees seems to enjoy kinda eating people, a taste he developed as time went on. Number 4. Patton Parnell. Patton Parnell is one of the vilest alternates of Spider-Man around. He shows up during our exploration of the Spider-Verse, where we learn that he is a fairly sadistic alternate of Peter Parker, whose hobbies include things like burning ants with a magnifying glass on hot sunny days, and spying on his neighbor whom he's kinda obsessed with, Sarah Jane. Patton, of course, is likely twisted in part because it is heavily implied that his uncle mistreats him. He is bitten by a spider, but instead of gaining miraculous abilities that all in all make him a more responsible person and a hero, he becomes a spider-like creature, mutating and becoming more monstrous and murderous, both inside and out. Yikes. Number 3. Poison. Poison is an alternate version of Peter Parker inspired by the Spider-Man story The Other. He hails from a what if where we explore the idea of what would have happened had Spider-Man rejected his connection to the spider within and rejected instead of embracing his role as a spider totem. This would have left Peter vulnerable basically to outside attack. Trapped within his cocoon with no way out, the symbiotic being that we often refer to as Venom sensed Peter's vulnerability and saw a chance to merge with him. Venom then leaves his current host Matt Gargan to forcibly connect with Peter, and together they become Poison. Poison is horrifying and attempts to recruit Mary Jane as his partner, but after she rejects him, he believes that the corpse of Gwen Stacy will suit him better. Oh dear. Number 2. Matt Gargan. Matt Gargan is known as the Spider-Man villain Scorpion, but at one point he too became an alternate version of Spider-Man, albeit a really messed up and twisted version, as he served as Spider-Man for Norman Osborn's Dark Avengers, which was primarily made up of villains posing as heroic counterparts. In Mac's case, the heroic mantle he was made to fill in for was Spider-Man, although he wasn't so much Spider-Man but kinda like an alternate Venom posing as Spider-Man. His suit was made of the symbiotic being known as Venom, who was merged with him at the time, and was also like really juiced. But Norman fixed it so that he wouldn't appear as juiced. He still kinda got like a little giant. He got a little giant when it came to him attacking people though. This often turned Matt Gargan's Spider-Man into a horrifying monster who threatened to, and often actually did, devour those people who stood in his way, even sometimes almost eating his own teammate, which obviously they did not like. Number 1. I-APEC. I-APEC is known in Marvel Comics as I-APEC the Decapitator, and was once worshipped as a god in Peru. Remember how we talked about Man-Spider earlier? I-APEC is like a more terrifying version of that being. He is typically known as having pointed teeth, snakes for hair with multiple arms, and his lower half being the hairy body and legs of a spider. He ended up getting recruited to Norman Osborn's Dark Avengers to act as their Spider-Man after Matt Gargan was Spider-Man, because this was a different version of Spider-Man, a different version of the Dark Avengers, after Norman Osborn escaped the Raft the second time, this time successfully, and then attempted to resurrect Hammer and bring back the Dark Avengers. I-APEC was made to look more humanoid, more like Spider-Man with a genetic formula, except for the fact that, you know, he had 4 arms still, so almost like Spider-Man, but not quite. Later on, he would also be coerced into serving on Luke Cage's Dark Avengers, which were kinda like DC's Suicide Squad at the time.